Mr. Danny Davis of Illinois for today, and Mr. Jackson of Illinois for today.
Without objection, the requests are granted. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Kamlanger Dove, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material on the subject of this special order.
Without objection.
It is with great honor that I rise today to co-anchor this Congressional Black Caucus Special Order Hour along with my distinguished colleague from the great state of Ohio, Congressmember Shontel Brown. For the next 60 minutes, members of the CBC have an opportunity to speak directly to the American people on the harmful policies of Donald Trump's first 100 days in his second term, an issue of great importance to the Congressional Black Caucus, to the Congress in general, to constituents that we represent across this country, and really to any living, breathing person on this planet. The first 100 days of this administration have been about policies that are delusional, diabolical, destructive, dangerous. These have been doozy policies and politics that are doing nothing but hurting America, especially Black Americans. We are also going to be talking about so many of these policies that seem uniquely targeted to focus on the place and the progress of Black Americans. But make no mistake, if you're trying to hurt Black Americans, you are inadvertently also going to hurt all other Americans, because so many folks are dependent on Section 8 vouchers, on Social Security, on Medicaid, on Medicare, on an economy that's working, on not being tariffed up the wazoo so that you can be able to purchase goods and services that you need to keep this economy growing. The American people need a moment of peace and structure coming from this administration, not the chaos and the ringing of alarms every single moment. And this is not hyperbole, even though it might sound like it. This is not partisan spin. We have seen this when we have gone into our districts, when we have hosted town halls, when we have talked to the American people. Everyone is saying the same thing. How can you protect our Constitution, protect our economy, protect our way of life, our freedoms, our liberties, not deport us? What is this administration doing to help us rather than to hurt and harm and divide us? The power of this country is in the people. And for the next 60 minutes, the Congressional Black Caucus is going to be speaking to the people in crystal clear ways, using crystal clear words about how we are on the brink, if not through the door, of a constitutional, of an economic, of a political, of a moral crisis, and a crisis of the very identity of this country. It is often said that when America has a cold, Black America has a pneumonia. Well, let me tell you something. We are all up in urgent care and in the community clinics and in the hospitals because we are all sick right now. We cannot afford another 100 days of the 100 days that we have just seen. I have so much more that I want and that I will say, but I want to pass it over to Representative Shontel Brown from the great state of Ohio to share some words before we allow our members of the Congressional Black Caucus to also speak to the American people.
Thank you to my dear friend and colleague, Congresswoman Kamlanger Dove, for leading our CBC Special Order Hour this evening. You know, I really appreciate your voice in Congress, from the way you fight for your constituents in Los Angeles to your work on the Judiciary Committee. You are such a strong advocate. And on the Oversight Committee, we are doing similar work, trying to provide the American people with some amount of transparency and accountability. Because we have a president who doesn't think that the rules apply to him. And so here we are tonight to talk about Trump's first 100 days. And I would encourage people watching, shout out to my mom and dad. I know we have at least 2 viewers tonight, Sydney. But for the others, I would encourage you to check out Congresswoman Kamlager-Dove's social media series titled, "Is This Stuff Legal?" She's doing a great job breaking down how this has been a lawless White House from day one. And the truth is, time and time again, what this administration has been doing has not been legal. In fact, in Trump's first 100 days, more than 220 lawsuits were filed directly challenging his agenda. 220. And federal judges have issued over 130 court orders blocking or pausing those actions. So if you're doing the math, Trump's being sued more than twice a day, and he's losing in court more than once a day. They have tried to fire federal workers without cause, detain and deport people without due process, freeze and deny congressionally appropriated funds, and seize sensitive taxpayer information through the Treasury and Social Security. This is why Trump's White House is now ignoring federal courts and openly ignoring the Constitution. He doesn't have a mandate, he doesn't have the votes in Congress, and he doesn't have a legal agenda. So he wants to ignore the law. But we should not be surprised by this. Trump said he was going to be a dictator on day one. He told us this is what he was going to do. And I personally don't know of any dictators who stop being a dictator on their own. So we've got to fight back, and we've got to fight back in the Congress, in the courts, and in the community. My constituents in Cleveland and people across the country are counting on us to stand up, fight back, and use every tool we have to oppose this agenda. Because this has been 100 days of chaos, cruelty, and cuts. The Trump administration has broken the economy, broken the law, and broken our alliances. In just 100 days, this White House has shrunk the economy, raised prices, and put us on track for a recession. Now, President Biden handed him the strongest economy in the world, and Trump is running it into the ground, which really isn't surprising because this is a man who could not make money running a casino, not to mention who filed bankruptcy 6 times. So the disastrous policies of this White House are hurting the entire country, absent a few of his billionaire buddies, of course, but it's the people that many of us represent that are the most at risk. See, this is a White House that constantly diminishes and dismisses Black achievement. A White House that blames any and everything on diversity, equity, and inclusion. A White House that is trying to defund our public safety programs and our police. A White House that is trying to defund our schools. And a White House that has rolled back federal anti-discrimination policies that have been on the books since 1965. That's right, since 1965. See, in his first week, President Trump revoked the Equal Employment Opportunity Executive Order that prohibited racial discrimination for federal contractors. And let's be clear, they aren't hiding this agenda to make discrimination legal again. And that's why I filed legislation to restore those policies, and I am proud to have had over 60 co-sponsors in the House, including many of my colleagues here this evening. Mr. Speaker, it's been a disastrous 100 days, but I feel the worst is yet to come. This week, the Republican-led committees are working on Trump's Republican ripoff, a plan to take from our constituents so that they can give to the ultra-wealthy and the very well-connected. We're talking about health care and taking away Medicaid coverage. We're talking about nutrition and taking away SNAP benefits from families and so much more, because the budget they voted for called for $880 billion in cuts to Medicaid and $230 billion in cuts to SNAP. So here's the reality. 21% of my district is living below the poverty line, and 30% of the children are in poverty. I represent 280,000 people on Medicaid, 160,000 people on SNAP. These aren't just numbers. These are real people. And sadly, this White House isn't listening to them. So it's up to us to amplify their voice tonight, today, and every day. And with that, I want to say thank you again to my good friend, Congresswoman Kamlager-Dove, for leading this special order hour. And with that, I yield back to you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Brown from Ohio. As you can see, Congresswoman Brown was breaking it down, she was keeping it real, and she was bringing the receipts. And that is what the Black Caucus does each and every day. We break it down for the American people, we keep it real to the American people, and we bring the receipts for the American people. The problem is there are so many receipts to share right now in just 100 days. We don't have enough tote bags for all the receipts. But now I want to bring to the floor Congresswoman Lucy McBath from the great state of Georgia to share remarks.
Well, thank you so much to my esteemed colleagues, Representative Kamlager-Dove and Representative Brown, for their leadership in tonight's CBC Special Order Hour. Most opportune time for us to be able to talk directly to the American people about the truth of this White House and its administration. Last week marked the first 100 days of the second Trump administration, and on behalf of my constituents in Georgia and an ever-growing number of American people, I'm here tonight to continue speaking out against the chaos, the division, and the indefensible hatred that is being sown by this president and this administration. Just over 100 days in, the American people are exceedingly worried and exhausted by the uncertainty that has defined this presidency, fatigued by the endless cascade of bad news from every corner of our federal government, bone-weary by the fear of the impact these reckless actions continue to have on our working families. For Black Americans in particular, the Trump administration has made direct attacks on our communities and emboldened extreme hatred and bigotry. The symbolism of using the presidency to eliminate foundational programs cannot be understated. He has used the most powerful office to dismantle foundational policies and scapegoat the American citizens. These attacks have material consequences. The uncertainty surrounding the future of long-standing federal programs harms the most vulnerable populations that we serve. Just last week, I toured a Head Start site in my home state of Georgia and heard directly from parents and educators about the vital role these child care programs play in supporting the economic success of the families with their young children. Head Start affords working families the peace of mind that their children will be cared for and educated during the workday. Recent White House budget documents show that the administration has backed down, for now, in some of their attacks on Head Start and resources that are helping our families. But we can't stop our advocacy now until these programs are absolutely protected. The continued actions of the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, to dismantle the federal workforce also have devastatingly outsized impact on Black Americans. Federal government work has long been a path to upward mobility for those seeking a career in public service. And the elimination of tens of thousands of positions across our federal workforce will continue to hurt our families and our communities. I grew up in the heart of the civil rights movement. As a child, I saw my father and my mother take a stand against those who legislated against our freedoms and our rights as Americans. 60 years later, those same forces are animating the actions of this administration. We cannot afford to go back in time. Though I know so many across the country are dealing with the feelings of exhaustion and hopelessness, we cannot grow complacent. We cannot succumb to the forces of fear, hatred, and bigotry. The work of the Congressional Black Caucus and the House Democrats are taking up just reinforces our resistance to the division that we are living and seeing through at this very moment. Together, we are using every legislative tool at our disposal to fight back against these reckless actions. Once again, America, I want you to know that the Democrats and the Congressional Black Caucus and all of the other tri-caucuses, we are fighting every single day for you. We are using our voices to speak up and sound the alarm on the harm this administration is causing communities all across this country. And we are doing so with unflappable energy and determination. As Democrats, we know that our light shines in the darkness, and the darkness shall not overcome it. Just as I sang as a little girl during the civil rights movement, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. And I yield back.
I want to thank the Honorable Lucy McBath from the great state of Georgia for her remarks. And I'm grateful that she talked about DOGE because the reality is that DOGE has not found any substantive evidentiary fraud in all of their work these past 100 days. Because if they had, they would be blasting it across every social media platform, every network. They probably would be making stamps and stamping your head with all of the fraud that they have found, but that is not the case. What they have been doing, however, is harassing and intimidating and disrespecting our workers, creating a hostile environment for our federal workers, intimidating them to resign or to leave, mostly because of ideology, not because of the work they are doing. And we have to continue to tell the truth, which is that government is people. Government works because of people. So when you have a healthcare claim, when you are trying to get your insurance, when you are trying to apply for FEMA, when you are trying to get your Social Security payment, when you are trying to get access to your Medicaid or your Medicare benefits, when you are trying to find a nursing home facility, when you are trying to get a passport, when you are trying to call into the government to get the help that you deserve from the government, that we have all pledged to provide for you, there ain't going to be nobody to answer the phone when you call. Because DOGE and this administration are actually working overtime to make sure that you don't have access to government. The policies of this administration are working overtime to try to make sure that there will be no government. And they're painting it all under the auspices of Black folks, because somehow they think that Black America is responsible for so many of the ills that they are trying to cure. Once again, as Representative Brown shared, the diversity, the equity, and the inclusion. And when last I checked, this country was founded on all of those things. It has been made great because of all of those things. And when we talk about DOGE, I know the one thing I know for sure is that these folks working for DOGE are actually squatting in the departments where they have worked to terminate federal workers. And they're bringing in washers and dryers and mattresses and all their kids living rent-free in departments that are actually designed and structured to answer the call and take care of the needs that you have as a citizen, as a constituent, as an American. And so we have to talk about that. That's the fraud. That's the fraud. So now I want to, it is my privilege to yield time to the Honorable Jasmine Crockett from the great state of Texas, and you know that she's going to bring receipts. I know she has a trunk full of them.
Thank you so much to my amazing colleague from the great state of California. Mr. Speaker, I rise today with a simple but clear message. First of all, I just got to clear up a few things. Instead of the president cosplaying as the next pope, he may want to try to cosplay as an actual president of these United States. That means that he may have to do a little bit of research and decide that he wants to understand that he swore an oath. And this oath was to protect and defend the Constitution. That is the oath that he was supposedly taking on January 20th, as well as we may want the president to look into what the Declaration of Independence was about. We may want him to understand that there was a foundational document as it relates to self-determination of those who had recently gained their independence from Great Britain. I would hope that he would maybe spend a few of these days in this first 100 days, and it is sad to say that it's his second term, that he doesn't understand that the Declaration of Independence is about this idea that we are entitled to the right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that's all of us that are here. But let's go through some of the things that he did manage to do and some of the havoc that he has managed to wreak. In the first 100 days of Trump administration, we have had to, unfortunately, endure a lot of pain. This administration clearly is not ready to lead. They are only here to tear down. In just 100 days, we've witnessed an administration hell-bent on dismantling the very systems designed to protect the most vulnerable amongst us. And for Black Americans, those of us who have always carried the weight of a broken system and bad policies, the danger is real, it's tangible, and it is urgent. Let me be clear, the last 100 days have not been an accident or a fluke. He has done exactly what he said he was going to do. He gave us the blueprint in Project 2025. Some tried to warn us of the dangers, and well, here we are. Let's talk about education. Within weeks of taking office, the Department of Education quietly rescinded guidance encouraging schools to teach honest, inclusive Black history. Instead, they're attempting to whitewash history and have begun promoting so-called patriotic education, a sanitized version of history that skips over slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, and systemic racism. He signed an executive order reinstating, quote, common sense discipline practices in school, rolling back previous administrations' attempts to address racial disparities in school discipline practices. Make no mistake, these decisions have a direct impact on Black children, children who deserve a fair shot to learn in safe and supportive environments. Let's talk about housing. HUD announced plans to gut fair housing rules meant to fight discrimination. You know, the same ones that he violated back when he was a landlord so many years ago. Yeah, those same rules that were supposed to fight discrimination in lending and zoning. This means there will be even more roadblocks for Black families trying to buy a home and yet another generation locked out of building wealth. Let's talk about public safety. While they're cutting after-school programs and community violence prevention, they are pouring millions of dollars into militarizing police departments. They're criminalizing our communities while stripping away the very resources that keep us safe. And finally, money talks, so let's talk money. This administration slashed funding of 7 government agencies that provide Black communities with educational materials and economic opportunities, including the Minority Business Development Agency, the only federal agency dedicated to uplifting minority businesses. This agency helps entrepreneurs all across the country, including in my own district, keep their doors open and their workers employed. Now, it's under attack. And while all of this is happening, they're dismantling environmental protections and environmental justice, slashing funding for HBCUs, and rolling back civil rights enforcement across federal agencies. Let me repeat what that means. To roll back civil rights enforcement across federal agencies. This is the so-called DEI attacks that we continue to endure in this country. This is their way of trying to roll back the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that so many died and bled for. Mr. Speaker, this is not just about policy disagreement. This is about direct attacks on Black futures, Black prosperity, and Black freedom. This is about right versus wrong, point blank. But here's what they don't understand. We've seen this playbook, and every time they've attempted to silence us, erase us, and hold us down, we've resisted and we've pushed this country closer to the ideals it claims to hold. They are trying to bury us, but what they don't realize is that we are seeds and still we rise. I stand here a proud Black woman and a proud member of the Congressional Black Caucus, and I refuse to stand by while this administration tries to turn back the hands of time. We will resist. We will continue speaking truth to power, and we will keep organizing until everybody is free. Because in the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, nobody's free until everybody's free. I yield back.
I want to thank the Honorable Jasmine Crockett for her remarks and for always keeping it real. And I want to reiterate some of the things that she said, which is that this administration has been targeting Black Americans, possibly because they are so afraid of our shine. This administration and its policies have certainly been laser focused on trying to tear down Black women. And you don't have to connect too many dots to understand why that is. It is now my privilege to yield to the Honorable Glenn Ivey from the great state of Maryland to break it down for us and share some of his receipts.
I thank the gentlelady from California, my colleague from Ohio, and the previous speakers. I want to say it's an honor to be here, not just as a member of Congress, but to be here as a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, especially at a time like this. I rise today not just with concern, but with alarm. In his first 100 days back in the White House, Donald Trump has unleashed a full-blown assault on America, on our institutions, on our workers, on the rule of law, and on democracy itself. This is not leadership. This is a broken promise. I'll talk a little bit as we go forward about the promises that now President Trump made during the campaign, especially with respect to the economy. He said he was going to put money back in people's pockets, but as we've seen dramatically in the first 100 days, it's been quite the opposite. I had one friend tell me that his 401k had turned into a 101k after Trump put his destructive tariffs in place, and it's been damaging not just for people who own stocks, not just for people who are small business owners, but for every American across the country, and unfortunately, it looks like it's going to get worse in short order. But I wanted to start first with government workers. The president promised to tackle government waste, but it's been anything but that. As we've seen, his administration systematically targeted the federal workforce, gutting critical agencies, sidelining career professionals, and pushing out civil servants, not for failing to do their jobs, but for doing them too well. I want to talk about the waste piece for just a moment here, too. I know they said, he's out here trying to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. But we know that's not right, because one of the first things he did was fire the investigators who were in charge of ferreting out waste, fraud, and abuse. They're called inspectors general. And he fired 18 of them all at once, almost on his first day in office. So you know he's not trying to cut back on waste, fraud, and abuse. What he's trying to do, actually, is eliminate non-political federal workers, people who've gotten their positions based on merit, people who are distinguished in their careers, have outstanding experience, great credentials, but he's trying to force them out so he can replace them with people who are politically loyal to him. I just want to chat a little bit about the firing of these people, because I know a lot of folks across the country, they're not in love with government workers. They think maybe it's a good thing to get rid of government workers. But I'm asking you to keep in mind the dire consequences of these terminations. For example, he terminated people who were running clinical trials at NIH, and clinical trials on things like Alzheimer's, cancer, measles. I'll take the measles one, for example. I ran into a woman at a church I was attending a few weeks ago. She had a PhD, and she was working on a clinical trial in measles. And the idea was to figure out how to address the measles outbreak that's just been happening. And on that front, think about this. Basically, measles had been eradicated in the United States. At this point, though, at last I heard a few days ago, we have 2,000 people in the United States who are now suffering from measles. And we've actually had 2 people die, one of them a child, from measles, something that's been eradicated and we've been addressing for decades now. But it's catching its steam again and starting to kill more people. The Alzheimer's piece is especially of concern to me. My father died from Alzheimer's. And watching that happen is like ripping your heart out. And they had clinical trials going on Alzheimer's, which were shut down based on the terminations of the Trump administration. And the thing about clinical trials that you need to remember is that it's not like a light switch. You don't just switch it right back on again. When you shut down a clinical trial, some of which have been running for years and have cost thousands, potentially even millions of dollars, you can't just start it right back up again. You have to start over with those. And so you push back the ability to have cures for some of the most debilitating and dangerous diseases facing humanity today by the decision he made to shut down these clinical trials. Cuts to hospitals is another one. Now, closures of rural and urban hospitals in many instances is going to be a result of the Medicaid cuts that they're talking about making right now. And that's not just President Trump, that's some of my House Republican colleagues here too. But make no mistake, that's going to lead to hospitals closing in the places where they're needed most. I just read an op-ed over the weekend about a doctor who was working in a rural area, and his hospital was dead between 200 miles apart hospitals. So if his hospital has to shut down, you'd have to drive 100 miles each way to get to another hospital. And he talked about the emergency surgery that they'd performed once there was an accident near where his hospital was located. If they had had the hospital there and been able to provide the emergency treatment that they provided, those people would have died. And he's talking about closing these hospitals down. And make sure you understand, too, for many areas, this is the only access to medical care that those communities have. And not only that, those hospitals are economic engines for those communities, because for many of them, those are the jobs in those communities that the people turn to and need the most. Schools. Terminating Title I funding or cutting it back to the extent they've talked about, I've been told could lead to the shutdown of a number of schools, not just in urban areas, but in rural areas as well. Because the Title I funding goes to teachers who are teaching in low-income schools based on the formulas that they use to make those determinations. So you're going to have teachers being lost, teachers who are terminated, in the schools and district where they are the most needed. And in many of these areas, those are the schools that are still trying to catch up from the losses that were caused during the the COVID outbreak. We shouldn't be shutting these down. We should be expanding the resources that they have. But those Title I schools are at risk. Firing veterans. When they fire these government workers, one thing they don't seem to remember is that 30% of all government workers across the country are veterans. And keep in mind, too, these aren't just people in the D.C. metropolitan area. 80% of government workers live outside of the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. They're in jurisdictions and states and communities across the country providing services that those communities need. They won't miss the water till the well runs dry. And then I'll stop with this one, just on the government cuts piece, cuts for victims of crime. The VOCA cuts, VAWA cuts, VOCA stands for Victims of Crime Act, VAWA stands for Violence Against Women Act. These are the types of funds, grants that have been making a difference in law enforcement across the country and that fights against things like domestic violence and sexual abuse. And he's making the cuts there too. But it's not just there. I want to chat a little bit about the rule of law issue here too. The president promised to uphold the law, as he must do. All of us take an oath when we're sworn in. The president, all of us in Congress. I even took one when I was elevated to become a federal prosecutor. But he's not following that oath. As a matter of fact, we've seen this administration illegally deny due process rights despite a Supreme Court order to return my constituent, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, back to the United States. Just a moment on that. Kilmar was deported from the United States even though a judge had given an order saying that he could not be sent to El Salvador until another determination was made. But guess what? Not only did they send him to El Salvador in violation of that order, they sent him to one of the worst jails in the world, which houses MS-13, which is the exact group that judge said he was supposed to be kept away from. And that's where they sent him. The Supreme Court said, you need to facilitate his return. The Trump administration has made no efforts whatsoever to do that. And matter of fact, President Trump was sitting in the Oval Office with President Bukele, the head of El Salvador, and they were joking about it. And last week, when President Trump did an interview, he said, yeah, he could just pick up the phone and have him brought back, but he's not going to do it, despite the Supreme Court order. And there have been other orders, too, that they're ignoring and not following. And this isn't just a problem for Mr. Garcia. Think about that 4-year-old who was deported last week, the one with stage 4 cancer, who was sent out of the United States with no medicine, no chance to talk to his doctor. Is that what America has become? Apparently, that's what Donald Trump thinks the people want. But I got to tell you, that is absolutely the wrong path for this nation to be taking. I know we want to deal with the immigration issue, but we can't do it at the expense of children, and we can't do it at the expense of violating the basic due process rights. But guess what? The judges who've told him that, not just the Supreme Court, but sometimes conservative Republican judges, like Judge Wilkinson in the Fourth Circuit based in Richmond, one of the most conservative judges in the country, a Reagan appointee, chastised the Trump administration for violating basic due process. Basically, he said, it couldn't be more obvious than this. You should have a chance to have your day in court before something as drastic as deportation happens to you. But, you know, not only did Trump ignore that, he's talked about deporting American citizens when he was sitting there with the president of El Salvador. And I raised concerns about that. I had Republican friends that got on me about it. But guess what? Last week, the House Judiciary Committee and the House Homeland Services Committees had votes. The Democrats proposed amendments that said, let's make it illegal, let's make a ban on deporting American citizens. Every Republican on both committees voted against that ban. That's where we are right now. Now, let me talk a little bit about tariffs. The president promised to make our lives more affordable. He said America's too expensive. Yet his tariffs have sent the nation into a tailspin. And now, I guess you could say that there are times when tariffs might make sense, but he did it the exact possible worst way that you could do it. He did tariffs on all countries and on all products at the exact same time. Now, there's no way that can work, and there's no reason to do it, because sometimes you got tariffs on things that we don't even make in the United States, like bananas. We don't grow them. We don't grow coffee. We don't grow chocolate. Why are you imposing tariffs on those items? And then the tariffs that he imposed on some of our best allies, like Canada, disrupted the automobile market. They're still struggling to try and get their way. Now, he backed off of the giant tariffs that he put in, but he left 10% tariffs in place. And we're still in the middle with one of the worst trade wars we've ever seen in human history, based on the, 140% now with China? I mean, at some point, what is it? Just going to be zillions, I suppose, in those sorts of tariffs. But the bottom line is, it's going to take the country into a recession, and we know it. I hope that we get a sense of how to pull this back together. I saw the president making comments, and he doubled down on them the other day. This is the one about, he said maybe kids will just have to get $2 instead of $30 or something, and maybe it's going to cost a little bit more. And I guess that was his best bah humbug imitation, but to sort of make light on the fact that these tariffs that he's put in place are going to make things more expensive for the American people. In contrast, and the exact opposite of what he promised to do when he ran for office and was elected. That's not right. President Trump, Elon Musk, their billionaire buddies, they pushed a budget that's nothing short on a war on working families, massive cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and SNAP, while Trump and House Republicans push for new handouts for the wealthy. The same man who claims to champion the forgotten American is cutting health care for the disabled, for children, and for seniors. This is an administration that rules not with hope, but with fear. And it's using the machinery of government not to serve the people, but to punish the president's perceived enemies, including those who brought January 6 rioters to justice. Just a moment on that. He actually forced out Department of Justice prosecutors who did nothing but handle cases that they were supposed to handle. And I guess he's going to say that they were mishandled in some way, but guess what? The prosecution of the January 6 rioters resulted in more than 1,000 convictions. My recollection was there might have been 2 or 3 acquittals during that period, but everything else was a conviction. And the fact that, let's say even more people had been acquitted, that doesn't mean these prosecutors did anything wrong, and it certainly doesn't mean that they should be forced out of their positions. Same thing with the FBI agents. They sent over a list of 5,000 FBI agents to the Department of Justice, and guess what the common denominator was? They had all worked on January 6th investigations. So instead of our FBI agents focusing on, say, terrorism or organized crime, they've got to be looking over their shoulder because they know the president's coming after them. And he's got the Department of Justice weaponized not to go after the criminals, but to go after career FBI agents who've done nothing but serve the public and fight crime for the American people. Let me be clear. As we move past 100 days, I will never stop fighting for those I represent against the abuses of this administration. We're not just battling over budgets. We're battling over the future of the country we wish to have. Not a government for the wealthy and well-connected, but a government that works for all people. This is not business as usual, and House Democrats are standing up and fighting back. I want to commend my colleagues for tonight and pulling this together and doing such an outstanding job and moving this forward. And I also want to thank the people out there, people in communities across the country who've come to rallies. Some are Democrats, some aren't. Some are Republicans, some aren't, but they're coming out to express their concerns about the direction this nation is taking. I want to thank them for doing that, for making sure that they remember that they have the ultimate power. They're the ones who determine what happens with this democracy. And now is the time for them to stand up and for us to stand with them. And with that, I yield back.
I want to thank the Honorable Glenn Ivey for his very sobering remarks. Mr. Speaker, may I inquire how much time is remaining?
The gentlelady has 16 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to add my thanks again to Representative Glenn Ivey for talking about health care and the fact that this administration has been cutting grants to the National Institute for Health and cutting clinical trials. Over the weekend I was at an event and we had doctors and we had advocates talking about cancer, talking about breast cancer. And this country is actually on the precipice of discovering a vaccine for breast cancer, a cure for breast cancer. We have amazing scientists in this country who have been researching this, and they are at the point of clinical trials. And I don't know if you know anyone in your family that is a survivor of breast cancer or any other kind of cancer, but oftentimes when you go and the surgeon puts you under to take it out, they don't know if they have gotten all of it out. They hope that they have. But for some odd reason, we have not advanced the technologies to get all of it out. And now we are on the precipice of being able to do so. And do you know what this administration did? Instead of accelerating those clinical trials, instead of offering funding for that research to continue, instead of wanting to be a champion of the cure to cancer, this administration has cut that research, cut that funding, cut those clinical trials, and cut funding to educational institutions, to colleges and universities that are doing that kind of research, essentially cutting off our future scientists and innovators and problem solvers, our kids who are investing their time and their money and our money and their sweat to go to school and get an education and learn enough to help this country move forward and progress. They are getting the short end of a stick. They're actually being beat on the head with a stick, being held by this administration. Representative Ivey talked about what's happening with the judiciary, and in fact, this president actually said he didn't know if he even had to uphold the Constitution, and then this administration is going to sue Justice Roberts. We have moved from 3 branches of government to 1 branch of government, and Republicans are silent tonight, just like they've been silent at all of the markups and all of the hearings that we've had this month. Silent, afraid, unwilling to stand up for their constituents, only willing to defend this administration. And they're going to be tasked hard when they continue to have to go into their districts and sell the fertilizer that they have to feed their constituents, voters, Americans, the fertilizer coming out of this administration, designed to harm everyone that hasn't bent the knee. So with that, it is my privilege to yield to the Honorable Gabe Amo from the great state of Rhode Island.
Mr. Speaker, as many of my colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus have laid out, Donald Trump has failed the American people. That's why I'm grateful to my colleagues, Representatives Kamlager-Dove and Representative Brown, for leading this special order hour. And let's focus on these failures. In countless ways, Donald Trump has failed the American people. He has failed to bring down prices for families. He has failed to keep Americans safe. He has failed to heal, or even attempt or pretend to address the deep divides that plague this country. In fact, he's making them worse. Worse still, he's refused any kind of accountability for the countless mistakes that he, Elon, and the crew have made over the past 100 days. When the stock market is up, oh, that's because of him. When the stock market tanks, well, that's Joe Biden's fault. And if it doesn't get better, well, that's Joe Biden's fault too. Mr. Speaker, no parent would accept this behavior from their child. So why do we accept it from the president? No company would accept this temperament from an employee. So why do we see normalizations of this behavior by Republicans when we see this bad behavior in our commander-in-chief? Mr. Speaker, surely we can still tell the difference between right and wrong. And certainly we can do that right here in this chamber. Surely when we see cancer research funding eliminated, when 2-year-old citizens are deported, when the budget resolution calls for the largest proposed cut to Medicaid ever, surely we can say these things are wrong, no? The American people are calling for leadership. They're calling for solutions to help them afford basic necessities. They want to be able to tell their loved ones it's going to be okay. But they're not getting that right now, especially in the black community. Instead, they're getting political theater about renaming the Gulf of Mexico and military parades. They're getting authoritarian threats about ignoring the Constitution and running for a third term. It's unserious. It's unbecoming. It's wrong. And let's call it what it is. It is dangerous. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, history will judge how all of us respond to this moment. I think I know what side I want to be on. The side of the Congressional Black Caucus, the side of the conscience of the Congress. Donald Trump has been a failure. But where he fails, we're here. We will fight. Fight for fairness, for justice, and the promise that has been denied to far too many Americans for far too long. May we continue down this righteous road today to fight, to march on for all of the battles that lie ahead. And with that, I yield back.
I want to thank the gentleman from Rhode Island for his remarks. Mr. Speaker, may I inquire how much time is remaining?
The gentlelady has 8 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I'm so grateful to be a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. And I want to just share some of my own stories coming from my district and also my experience. I was in that Judiciary Committee where we had the hearing on immigration. And I was in that committee when Republicans voted to deport and detain Americans, where they voted to allow for cavity searches for children, where they voted to allow ICE to go into domestic violence shelters, where they voted to allow January 6ers, those who wreaked havoc on this Capitol and assaulted Capitol Police and terrorized everyone in this building, where they voted to allow them to work for the federal government, including the Department of Homeland Security. And I asked, how can you deport an American? I mean, where are you going to deport an American to? I don't understand. And I have yet to see from the Republicans or even from this administration, can we get a poster? Can we get a picture of what a safe American looks like, a non-deportable American looks like? Because I want to know, I want to be able to share that picture, that photo with my constituents. So if you look like this, If you're maybe this shade, if you have this degree of melanin, if this is the color of your hair, or if this is the color of your eyes, or if this is what you say, or if this is what kind of accent you have or not, then you might be safe. But I think the American people need to know which one of them will be deported next. And I think the American people deserve to know which of their representatives is going to stand up for them. Because I know when the question was asked, will you stand up for Americans and prevent them from being deported, raise your hand, only Democrats raised their hand. And so I also had to ask, when our loved ones, when our friends, when our family members go overseas and they get snatched, are Republicans going to pick up the phone and ask to have their constituents brought back? Are they going to fight for them? Because in that committee, they said they were not going to. They have said that they're not going to fight for your health care, for Medicaid, for Medicare, for Social Security. I represent Los Angeles. People think it's flossy and glossy, I like to say. But I have the third highest Medicaid enrollee district in the country. And in California, we have 7 of the 10 highest Medicaid enrollee districts in this country are in California, and some of them are Republican districts. I think we all want to know, Black Americans, white Americans, Asian Americans, Latino Americans, all Americans want to know, are you going to cut their Medicaid? Are you going to cut their Social Security? 140,000 children under the age of 19, 40,000 seniors over the age of 65 in my district are at risk because of the policies coming from this administration. Nearly 80 million Americans get health care through Medicaid and through CHIP on the chopping block. $5.6 billion this president wants to cut from the Department of Education. The House Republicans' budget includes $330 billion in cuts. Come on now, Pell Grants, school lunches, Head Start, everything on the chopping block. And in my district, we have LA Unified School District. Many of the kids who go to school, their only meal is when they go to school. So I'm trying to figure out, when folks say that they're Christian, what kind of Bible are they using? Because the Bible that I have doesn't say that you starve children, that you cut off their health care, that you cut off the health care for their grandparents. And if your Bible says that, I submit that maybe you change your Bible, because that's unchristian-like to kill seniors and children. And then let's talk about rolling back bedrock civil rights era policies that are designed to actually allow everyone the opportunity to compete and participate in this marketplace. It's not about giving handouts. It's about creating opportunity. It's about creating access to competition. Why would you be afraid of that unless you're mediocre, less than average, and need extra help because you can't compete? Well, don't come for Black America. Fix yourself. Let's talk about the workers who are the backbone of our economy, the workers who run this government. I'm always surprised when folks talk about unelected bureaucrats. Elon Musk is an unelected bureaucrat, and you know, keep it real, all the staff that help us do our jobs and help our constituents are unelected bureaucrats. And you're actually, Republicans, this administration wants to cut the salaries that allow folks to answer the phone for our constituents. California has the second highest number of federal workers. Why are you going to cut that? And might I remind you, we have the Olympics coming, we have the FIFA World Cup coming, we have an All-Star game and a Super Bowl coming. We are still producing movies and TV. We are helping folks with their passports and their visas. You want all these games to be successful? You got to resource the departments that process the visas and applications to allow people to come here. Okay? So let's keep it real. You want to talk about housing? This administration is proposing to terminate Section 8, cutting rental aid, evicting 32,000 families from their homes. This president even refused to come to Altadena after the urban fires. That's how little this administration thinks about Black communities. This administration is not interested in Black America, even though this administration wanted to thank Black America. But what kind of thanks is that when you cut funding to HBCUs? What kind of thanks is that when you cut Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security? What kind of thanks is that when you cut Meals on Wheels and SNAP? We're going to make America hungry again. We're going to make America sick again. I have a binder full of actions from this administration that has come out of this administration in just the last 100 days. And they're terrifying. They're terrifying for Black America, but they're terrifying for all America. And with that, I am going to happily close out this CBC Special Order Hour and remind America that we will be back again next week with more information and more receipts and more truth. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my co-lead, Congresswoman Shontel Brown from the great state of Ohio, and all the members of the Congressional Black Caucus who spoke tonight. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the chair recognizes